I'm Susan. Welcome to Tea and Games. The tea today is hot. The tea today, is Big Snow Mountain of Mengku. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a tea from Tea Runners. I will put a link in the description below. It's not a paid advertisement. I just really like their tea. We're doing something a little bit different today, and I hope that you'll stick with me, even if you're not a big fan of Carcassonne, because we're going to be looking at Two Carcassonne Expansions, which are kind of interesting and entertaining, whether or not you are familiar with the game or not. The game itself is very simple. You just lay tiles and you match them and you complete roads and cities and fields. That's pretty much the entire game of Carcassonne. Though, of course, there are strategic considerations to be had. And there are also just a huge number of expansions for this, of which we have all that are in print, all of the major expansions in print, but not all of the mini expansions. We've got all the mini expansions that were in the big box. But yeah, this turned out to be really entertaining, these two expansions. We got a bunch of expansions. I should say. Carcassonne is my husband's favorite game. And I got a bunch of expansions in the fall, and I've been basically trying to fill in the gaps of the expansions that we don't have. And now we've got all of the majors that are in print. And we just, in the past few weeks, played the last two of the ones that I got in the fall. And those are Count, King, and Robber, and Hills and Sheep. And I have to say, Hills and Sheep had a couple of disappointing elements to it. So we're going to look at it first, because we're just kind of looking at this going like, what? Well, first of all, when I opened the box, I was expecting sheeples, like little sheep meeples. That would have been so adorable, but that's not how we do sheep in this expansion. Although, there's a part of me, I really want little cute sheeples because they've got lots of meeples. We do have shepherd meeples, though. Let's see if I can get it close enough to the camera for you to see. He's basically kind of like a little ghost figure with a long staff sticking up. And, ooh, this does not go here. This goes over here. And we have sheep tokens. And I see now why sheep meeples wouldn't work, because these sheep tokens go into the bag, beautiful bag that is provided. And the sheep on the tokens, they go from 1 to 4, and there are 2 wolves in the bag. There's also only 2 tokens that have 4 sheep on it. I think there's like 5 with 2 and 3 sheep and 4 with 1 sheep, 1 sheepies. And you put them in the bag, and this adds a pressure luck element to the game, because you can put your little shepherd out on the field and draw a sheep tile. If you draw a wolf, the shepherd comes home and wolf goes back into the bag. Or if you draw a sheep, you don't score the sheep, you put it down there with the shepherd, and then the next time you extend the field that the shepherd is on, green space basically, then you can either press your luck by drawing another token out of the bag, or you can bring your shepherd and your flock home and score the sheep that you've got. Kind of feel like if you've only got 1 sheep, that it's worth the risk to dip back into the bag. And I usually dip twice before I score my sheep, though that did not work out for me in the second game we played. I mean, that really did not work out for me. There are other features besides the sheep. Well, we've got the extra tiles. You always get some extra tiles with expansions, the full expansions, not so much the mini expansions. We got a couple of monasteries. And the reason why I think we got 2 rather than say 1, because some expansions I think maybe only have 1, is because the monasteries, they score. You score extra for vineyards. These tiles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tiles here, they have vineyards on them. See, that's a vineyard, not to be mistaken for gardens which have flowers and brightly colored, not green things in them. And gardens are scored using an Abbott meeple, which is a different mini expansion. These cities also have weird shapes on the city pieces that make it really easy to accidentally or on purpose connect cities to things. So these vineyards work with the monasteries. These monasteries and the monasteries in the base game, because monasteries score when you have 8 tiles surrounding them, and they score for 9 because the block makes a total of 9. Vineyards, you get 3 more points for each vineyard tile that you've got in those 8 tiles around the monasteries. And because monasteries tie up your meeples, putting together a cluster of monasteries and building off of it, or your opponent and you sort of sharing a little monastery area where you're taking advantage of each other to put your meeples out and finish that block up more quickly and bring them back in so you can use them again. Yeah, and we end up sharing vineyards too for scoring on this. So that was really interesting and adds a little bit of extra scoring for monasteries. But darned if you cannot always draw those vineyards when you're just trying to complete a monastery. I mean, there was one time it's like the monastery lacked. I had 2 monasteries and I needed 1 tile to complete them both. And I kept waiting for another vineyard tile, and finally I kind of realized I'm not going to get another vineyard there. I'm just going to have to try to get anything I can to fill in that spot. And I turned over the tile I needed to complete those 2 monasteries and score the 1 vineyard that I had that connected both of them. I did that on the last tile of the game, and that won the game for me right there. Of course, it also helped that Robert did not deploy his shepherds much in the first game. And I used my shepherds a lot, and I got very, very lucky. I drew no wolves in the first game. But in the second game, I didn't score a lot of sheep. That whole thing of putting sheep out and then, maybe drawing another tile, drawing another sheep before I score them, like the third time around when I extend the field, I just bring them home and score them. Yeah, I drew 3 wolves in a row. I drew a total of 6 wolves during that game. 6 wolves. I mean, and he just shellacked me in that game. I mean, I just had trouble completing stuff. And every time I sent a shepherd out with sheep, the wolves ate them. And so, I mean, I had a lot of problems in the second game. The first game, I thought, oh man, this is fun and easy. I mean, there was one monastery where I had like 3 vineyards around it. And so I'm going like, oh wow, points, 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 lots and lots of points. And then I get to the second game and I was like, oh man, I cannot draw a vineyard to save my life. And I can't even get the piece I need to complete that monastery block. And the wolves keep eating my sheep. So yeah, this is the Hills and Sheep. We enjoyed it and it was a lot of fun, but it really is the luck of the draw. This is a nice little pusher luck element here with the wolves and the sheep. There are 2 wolves in the bag. And I think there are like 16, 18 sheep tiles total. I think 16 or 18 tiles total, something like that. And there are a couple of wolves. Of course, as everybody's shepherds and sheeps and wolves and stuff start going out onto the board, the proportion of wolves to sheep in that bag, it shifts every time you stick your hand into that bag. So that's a nice little pressure luck element. And if you're looking to add a pressure luck element to Two Carcassonne, that is a lot of fun. And like I said, they have some really wonky city shapes here. So if you really like fighting over cities, then this could be the game for you, the expansion for you, particularly because of these other tiles I have not mentioned. These tiles annoyed the fire out of both of us, but they are useful. They are useful. We just don't like the instructions. So these are hills. Can you see there's a little bump on the tile? Yeah, it looks kind of like a Native American burial ground or something, or a prehistoric burial ground. Just a rounded thing. Although there's a flag on every one, like they're playing King of the Hill, which is kind of creepy if considering they look like burial mounds. Um, but yeah, and I think this is an inn on this. It's been a while since I played inns and cathedrals, so there may be something of that in there too. What the hills do is they break ties. So if you're competing over control of a city or a road, then having the hill tiles breaks the tie in your favor if you've got them like positioned there. But you see, the thing is, we play this two-player, and neither one of us see much point in fighting tooth and nail over control and possession of a city, which ties up more of our meeples that we could be putting out and bringing back in scoring, when we're drawing city tiles and road tiles like pretty much on every turn, unless we're pulling a monastery tile. So, I mean, it's not like that, like cities and roads are these rare tiles that we really have to fight over. So we don't really, I mean, there have been times when we've accidentally bumped into each other just because of the way of cities sprawl or roads end up turning. But we don't do that too often. So the tiebreaker aspect is not something we used when we played this expansion. So I can't really speak to how well it works. But the one thing we didn't like is when you draw a hill, then you draw another tile, upside down tile from the stack, don't look at it, place it under the hill, and then you put the tile down, the hill tile, so that the tile underneath just makes the hill stand up, because it's a hill. And this just struck us both as stupid and gimmicky. I mean, there's no special thing like at some point you reveal the hidden tile underneath and get something. No, there's nothing. You're just sticking a random tile underneath another tile because that tile has a hill on it. The only thing it actually does in terms of the game mechanics is it means that if you're counting things like vineyards or monasteries or pieces that have a certain amount of stuff, and you keep thinking there should be another piece like that. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 the monasteries or tiles or whatever, and you're thinking there should be another one. It could be one of those hidden tiles under there. Yeah, I mean, it would be a good way to thwart someone who was really good at tile counting if you're not, or don't do that. I kind of do it a little bit. If there are special tiles and there's just a few of them, I do keep track for the expansions. I'll go like, okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. That means there's like 4 left in the stack. So we're like halfway through the special tiles. So I do sort of track the special tiles. Regular city tiles, not so much. The weird city tiles here, though, make it very easy to end up accidentally connecting your city, or on purpose connecting your city to somebody else, and then the hill tiebreakers come in. Because normally you would have to have a majority of meeples to do that, which ties up your meeples. And we will get to meeple management in the next expansion. But the placing the tile under the hill, I think we're just going to house rule this and just not do that because it just annoys us. It messes up how nice the area looks when you're building. You just got all these wonky tiles sticking up. I mean, I'm just not a matchy-matchy person, and everything doesn't have to be neat. I am by nature just kind of inclined to things being messy and uneven, and yet this bothers me. So that kind of speaks to just how it is. And I think part of my dislike of it is not so much, not entirely the way it looks, but also, and my husband agrees with me, it just strikes us as being gimmicky and pointless. So anyhow, the Hills and Sheep expansion comes with a bag, comes with little shepherd meeples, comes with sheep and wolves. Sheep and wolves. It has hill tiles, it has vineyard tiles, and it's got a couple of monastery tiles. Got a nice pressure luck element going. And the hills, if you play with people that really enjoy fighting over cities and roads, I think that you should consider this expansion because the hills do provide a tiebreaker mechanism besides meeples. Besides just like piling on meeple after meeple after meeple. And the vineyards add a nice little extra bit of scoring. If you can get a really good little block of monasteries and vineyards there, that can really pay off very, very nicely. Overall, we like it. We're going to do a little modification on the hills, and more or less they're going to be regular tiles for us unless a tiebreaker situation comes up in the natural course of play. Now we go to Count, King, and Robber, and things get really interesting. Okay, wait, first, this is the box for Hills and Sheep. So you can see what that looks like. And also, this probably gives you a better idea of the look of it than me just holding tiny little pieces up to the camera. Teeny tiny little pieces. Okay, let's set this over here. Now we go to Count, King, and Robber. And as I say, now this is where things get really interesting. If you thought the press your luck thing with the wolves and the sheep was kind of wild, yeah, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is an amalgamation of a bunch of different expansions. When I first opened this box and started reading the rules and sorting through everything, I thought, my goodness, they just kind of like somebody just woke up one morning and said, let's see how much different stuff we can cram into a small box for this expansion. And I looked it up, and this is actually a compilation of a bunch of different mini expansions, but most of them work really well together. And the one that doesn't play well with others necessarily could be made to play well with others, and also it has its own special nice stuff. So if you want an expansion that does makes really simple extra scoring condition changes and is not going to disrupt your gameplay, Count, King, and Robber is the one for you. If you want an expansion that is going to upend your gameplay and just wreak havoc on what could be considered normal gameplay, this is also the expansion for you. There's just a lot going on here. Okay, first let's look at, oh gosh, I haven't even consulted my notes. Well, set them aside. First, there is just a mini expansion that you can roll into anything included in this. That is the River 2. River. There is a River 1 mini expansion, which is usually packed with the base game these days. River 2 does a couple of different things here. I think it's supposed to have an inn in it, but I do not see an inn. But it does have a volcano, so it can be played with Princess and Dragon with an extra volcano there. What you have is you have a source tile, which is put down first. This is true of all river expansions. And then you put down, taking alternate turns, the other river expansions, and you can place meeples on them and claim features, etc. as usual. It provides just kind of a new interesting structure and start to the game before you go into the regular tiles. This one has something different from the other river expansion besides the Princess. It's got a T-shaped river tile here. And because it has a T-shaped river tile, it actually has 2 end tiles, one for each branch. And so you can place this one, and then you can go ahead and place little river tiles on it, on either side and down and all around. And then you can lock off one of those with these and continue adding to the other until the river tiles are all gone. And the final river tile is, I think, the volcano. That's the big river. We have a river going into a city there. Okay, River 2 can be rolled into the base game or used with any of the expansions. It's the same as River 1 in to that extent. But now here's the interesting thing. The rules say not to use River 2 with all of these other stuff that's in the box. because apparently there is a way you can lay the river tiles down with the special Carcassonne city tile that will make the river impossible to complete. Now, I personally think that if you're looking at it and you're doing things in a really smart manner, that possibly you can work your way around this and still use this with the others. But it says in the book, don't use this with the Count expansion. You can use it with King and Robber. So let's look at King and Robber first, because King and Robber is the easiest. You have these special tiles, double-sided, king with his queen, and the robber. This is basically biggest city and longest road. And you have these little bit tiny tokens here that you put on biggest city and biggest road when they are completed. And that's the thing. You claim it. You get the tile and you put the token on it to mark which one is the biggest when it's completed. And whoever completes it, they're the ones that get the tile that say that little token belongs to them. And then you continue playing with the game. And when a bigger, longer road or a bigger city is completed, you look at the marker, count it up, see which one is bigger. And then it may possibly change hands, depending again upon who completed it, not who claimed the feature. You can have a meeple on a road or a city, and that city or road may be really, really big or long in the case of a road, and if your opponent is the one that places that last tile down that completes that feature, then they would get, whoa, almost picked up the wrong tile, then they would get the markers and the tiles showing that they have the biggest one. And this is for end game scoring, because you get, whoever has this, if you've got the biggest city token and tile at the end of the game, then you count up all of the completed cities belonging to everyone, even ones that were completed that nobody claimed, if there are any. And you count up all completed cities, and if you've got the king, you score 1 point for each completed city. Roads, if you've got the robber, then you count up all completed roads, long, short, fat, thin, whatever, all completed roads, and the robber gets 1 point for each completed road. So it's extra in-game scoring. This is a nice little expansion to wrap into your game if you just want to add a few more scoring possibilities, if you like building big cities or longest roads or something like that. And if you think that competing for the biggest one and trying to complete yours or somebody else's would be a fun addition. It's the simplest. This tea is so nice. And now it's actually a drinkable temperature. Now we get to the Count, and things get a little complicated. The Count has the potential of blowing up your game, meaning disrupting normal gameplay. The Count, I don't know if you can see it here, I may be able to get an insert in there if my video editor does not hash my inserts, which it does a lot of the time, which is why I use inserts less. The Count looks kind of like Yoda, only he's sort of a magenta color or a plum color. I think the little ear things are supposed to be like the color of a cape or something. We got extra tiles here, more nifty, weird city tiles. But the big thing, and I'll get to these other extra tiles here in a minute. The big thing is you have big, I mean really big starting tiles. So the way they say do this is you either start with the city tiles and don't play with the Count, or you start with this and you don't use the river tiles. But I think there is a way to put the river tiles out from this and make it work. But this is the City of Carcassonne is what it's called, and this is your starting block from which you place all of your tiles around it. You may notice there doesn't appear to be anything special about this. This is if you're not playing with the Count. Let's say you just think that these tiles are kind of cool and you want to play with like that big city block, and we've noticed it really helps structure for the game. If you just want to play with these, you can play with these. Just use this side. Then we get to the other side. The other side, you may notice there are some special features on it. There are little flag thingies with little symbols on them. The flags represent districts in the city of Carcassonne. And these districts have meeples that you can put on the district. And this district up here is a monastery district. And this is a road district. And this is a field district. And this is the city district. Now, the count starts off on the city. But if you want to use this for extra scoring and move the count around, you've got to meet very specific scoring conditions in your regular gameplay. You have got to complete a feature in which you do not score any points for that feature, but your opponent or one of your opponents scores for the feature that you completed. So, yeah, you're kind of thinking like, and that would happen if we competed for cities or roads, and I didn't get enough meeples on there, and I completed that contested city, but my opponent got the points for it because they ended up having more meeples, or the road, whatever. But it also means that you would be able to activate all of the stuff that you do with the city of Carcassonne and moving the meeples around and scoring off of them if you complete your opponent's city or road or field or monastery. Because if you complete your opponent's feature, then your opponent gets all the points and you get none. And what happens then is you can then put a meeple. You can then move the count if you wish, and you can put a meeple on one of these districts. And then when something is completed later on, you can move that meeple before it is scored. Then you can move your meeple, like if a monastery is scored and you've got a meeple on the monastery district and the count is not on the monastery district, then you can move it there and you can basically piggyback off of the scoring for that feature. And then, you know, there is kind of a moving of meeples into the city when you complete things and you don't get points for completing them. And then when things are completed and you're about to score and get points, there's moving meeples off of that onto the cities. I'm probably doing a poor job of explaining this, but if you're familiar with the game, you're going to look at the instructions and go like, oh yeah. But the fact that in order to activate this special dealio with the count and the districts and the extra scoring and moving meeples into the city and out of the city, in order to activate all that, you have to complete features and get no points off of them. That very, very much disrupts normal gameplay if you're trying not to give your opponent tiles to complete stuff. You're trying not to complete your opponent's stuff or lay tiles onto stuff that they've claimed. You want to get your own stuff, and you want to make sure they don't get your stuff. So this really is very disruptive to what might be considered normal gameplay. But it works really well with Count and King, if you think about it. Because Count and King, you're doing longest road and more cities, but the scoring for that goes with whoever, the claiming of that goes with whoever completes it. And it, once again, completing things is part of that function of the count. But the tricky thing about this, and something that you've got to keep in mind, is that if you're not good at meeple management, this potentially could be a problem for you. You might struggle with it because this is one more way to use up your meeples by putting them into districts here. So you may find yourself running a little short of meeples. And the Count never leaves the city. He's not counted as a meeple. Oh, and I might also add the shepherd over here for hills and sheep. It is not technically a meeple. It's considered a special figure, meaning that if you put a shepherd in a field, then you can still put another meeple on a feature on that tile. But going back to the Count here, it made meeple management a little bit more difficult. If someone in your play group is not good at managing meeples and is always running out of meeples, then this is going to eat their lunch. And but if on the other hand, y'all all do a pretty good job of managing your meeples and nobody is going begging for anything to put on there, there's no cities that are running empty or anything like that, and you want something that's just going to be a little bit more challenging, maybe a lot more challenging, and that will certainly change your gameplay because there's a real incentive to complete other people's features, move your meeples in, and then score off of other completed features later on. There's a real flow there. This is definitely going to add some complexity to it. And if you don't want the complexity, you can just play with the nifty starting tile. Or play with king and robber, which we did, using the starting river tiles or the starting base game tiles. There's just a huge amount of variety in this, and I haven't even talked about the cult yet. Yes, Count, King, and Robber has a cult in it. There are, and that is Esme, Gamer Dog. She's throwing in her 2 cents. These are cult tiles. See, little shrine things. You can place a meeple on there like you do a monastery. Esme, shut up! Anyway, you can place a meeple there like it's a monastery and surround it with tiles and score off of it just like a monastery. But the meeple you place on it is not a monk. It is a heretic. And if you place these tiles adjacent to monastery tiles, then the monk on the monastery tile, assuming that there's a monk on that monastery, the monk on the monastery tiles and the heretic challenge each other. And what happens is whoever completes their feature first scores. If you've got a shrine and you're surrounding it by 8 squares and one of those squares shares a square with a monastery, then now it becomes a race between you and whoever has that monastery to complete that block of 9 for the monastery or the shrine. Because whoever completes it, they get the 9 points. But the adjoining one, they just get their meeple back and they do not get any points off of it. It cannot be completed now, or it can be completed, but it won't score because they didn't complete it first. So this adds a little bit of a race element to the monasteries, which is kind of interesting because you've got to get those monasteries completed fast if you've got shrines next to them. You've got to get the shrines completed fast if they're adjacent to a monastery. And of course, you can put them anywhere. They don't have to be adjacent to the monastery, kind of the same way with the vineyard tiles. They do not have to be adjacent to a monastery. You can place them anywhere, but good things happen if you can stack them up close to a monastery block. So yeah, it adds a lot of variety to things. It really does. This, the Count, King, and Robber expansion, it adds simple stuff like scoring for completing biggest city, longest roads. It adds a nifty large starting tile combo. It adds the river too, which has like different branching river pieces. It adds shrines, which allows you to compete for the points of adjoining monasteries. It adds the Count, which allows you to move meeples in and out of the city and move the Count around. Oh, I forgot to mention about the Count. If the Count is on one of those districts where there's a meeple, that meeple can't move. It can't go out and do the scoring thing until the Count is moved to a different district. So there's kind of a push me, pull you there of moving the Count out. He totally blocked me. He totally blocked me in one of our games where it's like I could not get the count out of that block to save my life. I just couldn't get the right completion thing to get another meeple in there so I could move the count. So I missed out on some scoring opportunities. This definitely adds a level of complexity if you play with the count, but you don't have to. King and robber are fun. Shrines are fun. You can just play with the big starting block here, or the river expansion. River 2, I should add, which is different from River 1. So, yeah, we've been having some fun with Carcassonne, and it has just been really hairy sometimes. And I've enjoyed talking to you about it. I hope you found it mildly entertaining, even if you're not all that interested in Carcassonne Expansions. Because, I mean, these kind of do some crazy things to the base game. And I don't know, I'm wondering if we should roll them in together because they could do some crazy things to each other too. And that's another thing. We're still kind of moving things around, trying to figure out what expansions we want to play together with other expansions. If you have thoughts on Carcassonne Expansions, any of them, even ones that are not discussed in this video, place them in the comments because we've got a ton of Carcassonne Expansions. So yeah, this is what we've been doing the past few weekends, in addition to the other games we've played that I have mentioned on other videos. But it is time for me to sign off here. I got barking dogs to attend to, although now, of course, she's gone quiet. It's been good talking to you. And I will see you next time around the table. Bye.